If you've been looking at a Sony A7RV and couldn't justify or maybe afford the price, good news. The Sony A7CR is a cheaper baby brother of it. So what do these have in common? And more importantly, what do you sacrifice for $1,000 less? In terms of what they have in common, same 61 megapixel sensor, same ISO performance, same autofocus tech, same AI processing power. All the creative modes, all the picture profiles, S-Log3, S-Cinetone, focus breathing compensation, autofocus assist, and you can even load LUTs on this one. Both have active stabilization, but hold that thought sort of. And this one is obviously a lot smaller and lighter because it's the C, which stands for compact. But the $1,000 less you pay for this means you actually sacrifice quite a lot of features, which I think make the R5 such a good high-end professional, because it is a professional camera. And I'm not sure that this is really justified at the price it's being sold at. Let me explain. So the active stabilization, 7 steps versus 8. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's not that huge a deal, but it is when you're using it. It feels noticeably different. I've been raving about this a lot recently, especially for video, how holding it, hand holding it, feels just like using a tripod. It's not bad on this, but it's definitely not the standard, the level that this is at. I noticed the big difference when I was using it. 8 frames per second versus 10 frames per second. And this isn't one that I use hugely, but it's good to be aware of. This has 8K. This does not. And the big one here, the EVF and the screen. There's a huge difference between these two. The EVF on this is just not enjoyable to use. It's tiny, 0.7 magnification versus 0.9 on the R5, and it's nearly a quarter of the resolution. And that makes a completely different experience when you're using them. The easiest way to explain it is, when I use this, I have to really think about and focus on me using the EVF. I kind of have to squint and sort of close this one eye and really get my eye to focus inside this EVF because it's so small. Compared to on the R5, this is just a big, beautiful window that I can look through it at any given time. It's there. I don't have to focus on it. I don't have to think about it. I can keep this eye open at the same time as I'm looking through it. This is a way nicer experience when it comes to using it compared to this. Also, the screen on the R5 is phenomenal. It's the best that Sony has out on any camera, both in terms of experience and practicality. This has double the resolution that this has, and this is the multi-angle screen, which means you can flip it out to the side, you can go up, you can flip it out to the side and go up. You can put it in any direction you want because it's their multi-angle screen. This is half the resolution, and it's their vari-angle screen, which means it doesn't go up, it only goes out and then around if you want to vlog with it or see yourself when you film it. Now, I'm not so sure that this was a smart decision for a compact hybrid, which I think is primarily going to be picked up by still shooters. They might dabble in video now and then, but I think it's mostly going to be for photographers, because it's like Sony's way of going into that Leica Q3 Fuji X100V area of the market, which they're not really in right now. The previous smallest compact version was the Sony A7C, and now the Sony A7C II, but this is the higher end one, so it slides right into that gap. Maybe to attract people to Sony, or if you're already in the Sony ecosystem, then you want something a little bit smaller, this is it. And if you look at those camera screens, they only go up and down because they're primarily designed for photographers. The screen that goes out like this, that's not the best experience for photographers, especially, let's say, like street photography. Street photographers aren't using their screen like that. Now, if they'd have put the multi-angle screen on this, it would be a completely different story. Also, you are giving up one card slot. You only have one on there versus the 2 on the Sony A7RV. Now, I know that is a big thing in terms of body size. To have 2 card slots means a bigger body, but you need to know about it either way. And that gets you $1,000 off the price of the R5. But I feel like that $1,000 makes this a better buy than this. You're sacrificing a lot really for just that difference in body size. And let's be clear, this isn't big in the first place. And if you put on a bigger lens, just as an example here, like the 135, it's way too small. Obviously with something like a 35mm there, it's a way better experience and it just matches the body a little bit more. But even then, if you look at it by comparison of size, it's pretty big, and the gap inside there is very small for your fingers to fit in. Also, because the body's so short, your pinky really has nowhere to rest, and it's just a bit awkward. Now, with that said, if you use this grip extension, which Sony has brought out, which also fits on the Sony A7C II, it completely changes that experience, and it makes this way, 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 way nicer to use. And I've done a whole video about this, and I'll pop that up there for you to see as well. That on there now means your pinky has somewhere to go, and it just feels much nicer in the hand. It just feels like you can grip the camera a little bit better. But as soon as you do this, it begs the question, well, why would you not just get an R5 for the grip anyway, because that nearly makes them the same size with just the EVF chopped off the top. So really, I think the issue here is to do with the price that this is being sold at versus the R5. Let's be clear, if we remove this camera from the equation and look at this camera on its own, let's say that didn't exist, the tech inside this for the size is phenomenal. But the fact that you can get the R5 for $1,000 more with all those extra things in, which make it a fantastic camera, probably one of my favorites of this year and even last year, makes me really question this as an option. Now, it's easy for me as a consumer and a user, not really knowing anything about the production costs or the research and design costs, to just spitball prices. But I feel like this needed to be priced differently, lower, closer to like maybe $22.99, even $24.99, to separate it a bit more from the R5. Because I would love for this to do well and Sony to shake up the competition a little bit in that compact market, because they're not really in it right now until they decide to make the R1XR3. Which I think they really need to make. There has never been a better time than right now for that camera to exist. Also, something which annoys me a little bit and sort of proves a point with this is the way things are right now with firmware. And I have a solution which I think kind of makes a lot of logical sense. Now, manpower and budgets obviously play into this, but hear me out. The Sony A7CR has the ability to load your own custom LUTs, and it also gets the AI auto reframing stuff that the ZVE1 had in first. And I want that feature, both those features, the LUTs and the auto reframing, in the R5. And I know it can be done now, so it proves it's entirely possible. So why don't we have it? What I think Sony needs to do is take the Apple approach in terms of coming out with software updates at the same time as new hardware coming out that has new features in it that should be in older cameras as well. Every year, Apple brings out a new phone in September, we all know that, but a few days before, they bring out the software update, which has a bunch of new features that people with older phones and maybe aren't buying the newer phones can still get access to, providing your phone is still compatible. It's not like 5 years old. That's what Sony needs to do.